Hello there. What is going on, everyone? Today we're talking about the Starhawk class battleship for Star Wars Armada, the Rebels' largest ship, aka the New Republic. Also used this ship, but in Star Wars Armada, it's just about the Rebels. This thing is massive, strong, and beautiful. And we're going to break it down. We're going to be looking at the two versions of it. We're going to be looking at that Magnite Crystal Tractor Beam Array. We're going to be looking at some sample builds, also the titles, and different ways that you might incorporate this ship into your games of Star Wars Armada. If you're new here to the channel, we do lots of Star Wars Armada based content, so I'd love for you to check out some more of our videos. Also, join our Discord. We have a great family-friendly gaming Discord. Links are all that stuff, as well as social media links are all in the video description below, so you can join, ask questions, participate, become part of the community, and dig deeper into this game, as well as other Star Wars tabletop games. Also, we are giving away a lightsaber right now, so if you're interested in having a chance to enter to win that, you just have to be a subscriber and leave a comment on this or one of my videos. I want to hear what your favorite space battle was, whether it be on film or whether it be in a book or even in a TV show. Or even if it's not a Star Wars space battle, because other IPs exist, and there are some great space battles there as well. So I love hearing about people's different opinions on it, because I certainly have some of my own. Maybe I'll tell you towards the end of the video. All right, so with all that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the Starhawk. This thing is massive. It is huge. It comes in two varieties. It's got a Mark I and a Mark II battleship. This is likely to represent a little bit of the prototype and the final version that we see. And now the final version is basically this FFG version. Fantasy Flight kind of helped create the Starhawk. It was first introduced in Aftermath, the Aftermath trilogy of books, which kind of focused on the Battle of Jakku and what led up to that, where we saw 3 Starhawks kind of help defeat the Empire at the Battle of Jakku and help bring down the Super Star Destroyer Ravager over Jakku with their incredible tractor beam, and a really excellent battle that was written into a only kind of okay series of books. Like I liked the books, but they had a lot of issues, but I really liked the way the Battle of Jakku was written. It really helped me kind of sort of fall in love with the Starhawk. And so when it finally was unveiled, I was blown away that we finally got to see what it looked like. You may have also seen the Starhawk in games like Star Wars Squadrons, which kind of focuses on a prototype version of the Starhawk. So if you notice slight little things that just don't kind of look exactly the same as this version, keep in mind that that's the prototype. And so the version that you're looking at here, as far as the model itself, is also really based on the Starhawk Mark II. So there are 2 versions of it, but let's talk about this ship and what it really brings. Now, this is a centerpiece ship. It is an expensive model. It's also the last ship that the Rebels had. It's the first ship the Rebels had to have salvo. So it kind of was part of Wave 8, which introduced salvo to the game. Salvo being a fantastic and game-changing mechanic, which allows you to counterattack when a ship attacks you, and returning fire using your printed rear arc, which is a really nice thing, and the Starhawk is able to do it quite well. It is also a large ship, not a huge ship, but it's meant to be a large ship that's capable of going toe-to-toe with the huge ships like the Super Star Destroyer. It's got 14 hull, and the advantage that gives it being a large ship is significant. In a game of Star Wars Armada, which is only 6 turns long, it can be difficult to bring down a Super Star Destroyer because it's got 22 hull. But what's not so difficult is to at least get it to 11 hull or half damage on a huge ship. Now, the reason I mention that is because this is not a huge ship. So it's actually harder to earn points against a Starhawk than it is to earn points against a Super Star Destroyer. So this is, from a certain point of view, the tankiest, toughest to kill ship in the whole game. Obviously, a Super Star Destroyer is tougher to kill, but you don't have to kill it because if you get it to half health, you're going to earn points on it. This one, you're not going to earn any points unless you completely take it off the board. And it's pretty tricky to do that. And so I think that's one of the things I didn't initially take it to appreciate when this ship was first unveiled. And that I wasn't a big fan of it because I thought a lot of other ships kind of do what this ship does already. They have almost as much health. They have almost as much dice. Some of them have slightly better maneuvering, and some of them have certain other utilities. They don't necessarily have all the same upgrades. Again, this is a ship that features 2 officer upgrades, which is extremely rare in this game, and that's really cool. And it allows you to do a lot of different types of things that you normally can't do. And so all of those are nice, but it's an expensive ship at 140 or 150 points. It's way more expensive than all the other large ships and the big Mon Calamari ships that the Rebels have available to them. So I'm like, is it really worth it getting like a little bit more when the Mon Cal ships do the role of a tanky large ship just as well? And I think one of the main things that brings this ship over the top with respect to like that centerpiece flagship type of role is that 14 hull. While it is more than your other ships have, it also represents, it's still weighted against the 6 rounds of the game. And so, if the game went unlimited rounds or it just went until somebody was the victor, it might not be as significant. But it's very likely you're going to get to that end of the round and this ship's going to have like 1 or 2 hull left on it, and your opponent earns no points because they didn't take it off the board, versus, compared to a superstar destroyer, which they'd still earn 100 points off of, or a Mon Cala ship that would have been enough to kill it, and then they earn all of the points off of it. So the Starhawk's 14 points is really balanced against the amount of dice that people can really throw against it in 6 turns. So it has incredible staying power, especially with some of the upgrades and things that we're going to talk about with respect to this ship. Now, it is a beautiful ship. It has pretty well-rounded arcs. It's got wider side arcs. It's got, but it's still a pretty decent front arc. It's not hard to get double arcs on this ship, and it's got a lot of dice in all of them. It's also the most beautiful ship that the Rebels have, at least from a certain point of view. Like, maybe not everybody feels the same way about it that I do, but I think it's absolutely magnificent. I think Fantasy Flight Games did a great job in designing this ship and bringing it to life. They had such a tremendous opportunity to be able to do that, and I love how Armada was able to be the conduit that brought life to the Starhawk, and not just for this game, but for the entire Star Wars universe. Now everybody knows what the Starhawk looks like thanks to Fantasy Flight Games. So to everybody that worked on this ship and bringing it to life, thank you so much. It is awesome, and I still love it to this day. Even though I wasn't super crazy about it on launch, I've seen the light, and I'm in a love-hate relationship with it because I love to use it, but I hate when my opponents use it against me, if you know what I mean. Okay, so, but yes, we have a really interesting profile on this ship also. We have our front dot is a little bit farther back on the center, and our side dots are very, very far in on the sides. And that means your opponents have to kind of angle and maneuver a little bit differently than they would against a lot of other ships that have the dots closer to the outside. So it's going to be harder to get side arc shots on this one, and it's going to be, it's going to cause your opponents to have to maneuver a little bit differently against it. And of course, that sort of reflects the slightly larger front that we have, as well as the armor and the kind of areas that are just blocking off other shots. Like you may have to go to the front, and you may have to take shots into the front into that 6 shields that you might not otherwise want to. And again, this thing has just got a very, very scary presence, which is really cool. Now, let's go ahead and also talk about the thing that the Starhawk brings to the game, the Rebel super weapon, which is the Magnite Crystal Tractor Beam Array. Now, this is a pretty interesting upgrade. It's the only upgrade of its type available to the Rebels. It is the only super weapon available to the Starhawks, but it is also not unique. So you can run multiples of these if you want, but it comes at a hefty cost of 10 points. So you want to be really sparing on if and when you use this, because I don't believe all Starhawk builds really need to use this. It's something that is just a situational upgrade, and I think that that's one of the best type of upgrades in this game, is something that works really well sometimes, but isn't an auto include. And that's kind of where I put the Magnite Crystal Tractor Beam Array. It says, after the end of your activation, you may exhaust this card to choose one enemy ship at distance 1 through 5. That ship's speed is increased or decreased to match your speed. While your speed is 0, you cannot ready this card. So this card, it readies automatically at the end of your turn. I'm using the original version of it, but the new version will have the automatic re-ready symbol on it. And what this means is basically every turn you can just force somebody to match your speed. And what makes this so significant is that you can do two different things with it. One is, now considering you can only go speed 2 with this thing, you can't really make somebody go super fast. But you can take an opponent who is trying to go very, very slow and force them to speed up to speed 2. And this is potentially useful by trying to push them into an obstacle that they're trying to avoid, or maybe even push somebody off the map if they're like trying to stop, and like if they maneuvered incorrectly and they're going too close to the map, or even force them to ram into one of their own ships or an enemy ship. You can do some shenanigans like that. But the main strength, and the first thing that a lot of Armada players saw when they saw this card, is they said, wait a second, any other type of speed changing shenanigans doesn't actually let you set somebody's speed dial to 0, except for this one. And that's why this one is so both expensive and rare, in that it's the super weapon, because this can actually set an enemy ship's speed to 0, and almost nothing in the game can do that. It's extremely hard to force somebody to 0. You need like a special crit or a very bizarre set of circumstances to actually be able to do that. So this is a way that, now in order to do that, you'd have to set the Starhawk to speed 0. So you have to be vulnerable on the Starhawk. However, this is a ship that certainly can survive a few hits at speed 0. That's one of the things it can do, because it's got tons of hull and tons of shields. It doesn't really have to spend defense tokens for that long. And especially if it's against an enemy flagship that you have all of your ships. So like ideally, you're like, all right, I'm going to put myself vulnerable here and set myself at speed 0, but I'm going to make you speed 0 also, and then I'm going to have all my other ships attack you. Now, of course, if you set it to, if you're speed 0 and you use this, it stays down. Like basically setting somebody else to speed 0 causes this thing to kind of power down, and it cannot be ready. So then you're going to have to speed up on your next activation, and then you can ready this at the end of that turn. So you basically have a whole turn of downtime if you shut somebody's engines down completely. So you kind of, usually if you do that, it's a once per game thing that you're gonna, I mean, if you really try hard and everything lines up, you might be able to get it twice in a game, which can sometimes happen. But generally, this is a one shot if you're gonna try and get somebody to speed 0. It can be very, very strong if you get it on an opponent's flagship, and then you're able to capitalize on that. But opponents will typically see this coming, and if you're going, like if you're facing a Starhawk that runs this, you want to make sure you nav like first turn and just bank that token. So this way, when somebody does this, or if they're getting close enough to do this, you make sure you activate last. So if you are speed 0, they have fewer ships that can, can shoot you while you're at speed 0, and thus can't use any defense tokens. Also, you want to have that nav token, so just in case they change your top dial or do other shenanigans, hopefully you have the most opportunities possible to be able to, when you activate, to increase to speed 1. So this way you can then turn around and and spend defense tokens. Also, maybe you want to punish that Starhawk that also shut down to speed 0 to they can't spend defense tokens. And because again, if you're facing a Starhawk, you need to be firing at it a lot if you want to kill it. You either fire at it a whole lot, or you completely ignore it. All right, so that's the Magnite Crystal Tractor Beam Array. I want to talk about the two different types of Starhawks, starting off with the Mark 1. This one is a little bit cheaper, but doesn't have too much that's different. We're going to look at some of the dice differences in the anti-squadron armament. I want to start at the top, though. This is a Command 4 ship. Now, that is significant for a number of reasons. Command 4 means you're going to be sitting 4 dials. It's not going to be very easy to change up your commands. If you decide you need to change the plan halfway through the game, you're not going to be able to. It's just too big of a ship. You have too large of a crew on this ship, and if you tell them, I need more power to the guns, by the time that message gets relayed to the gunnery department, the game's going to be over. All right, so you've only got, in 6 turns, you got to plan 4 turns in advance, so you don't have a whole lot of ability to command and stuff. So dial changing shenanigans or dial adjustments are going to be important on a ship like this. You have also the fact that you're a Command 4 ship means somebody like Admiral Raddus can't warp in a Starhawk. So this is the only Rebel ship that can't be warped in by Raddus. So if you're using Raddus with a Starhawk, you want Raddus on the Starhawk and having another ship warping in. Although Raddus isn't too often used with the Starhawk, it is definitely a sometimes thing. I've done it a couple of times and I've had great success with it, but it's not the most popular commander for the Starhawk. I will talk about Krista Agate, who is probably the most popular commander with the Starhawk, in just a minute. It's also a 3-squadron ship. Again, it can order a lot of squadrons. It's a big enough ship that's pretty standard. It's also a 4 engineering, which is good. I'm glad they didn't give it 5 because it's already super tanky, and 4 engineering is a pretty good engineering value for a big ship. It has 4 defense tokens. It has 1 brace, 1 evade, 1 contain, and 1 salvo. So again, first ship to have salvo using the printed rear armament. You've got 2 red dice and 1 black, so it'll still have a respectable counterattack even at long range. 14 hull, blue and black anti-squadron. Again, speed 2, 1 click on each of them, so it's got a little bit of maneuverability, but not too much. Now, it's got a decent spread of armament here. Its front is got 2 black, 2 blue, and 4 red, which is just a tremendous dice pool, especially if you can get a close range. This ship's got black dice everywhere. So this one really would like to get to close range, but doesn't have to. It's still got 2 red on the sides and 2 blue on the sides. So it's got rainbow dice just about everywhere except for the rear. A lot of blue, a lot of red, but also a respectable amount of black, which is really cool, and you can really punish people if you get close. We do have, of course, the super weapon slot. We have turbo laser and we have ion cannon. No ordnance on this one, which probably doesn't really need. It's not heavy on ordnance. It's probably, red dice are probably the ones that you want to be able to manipulate the most, since you have those. You have the most red dice. And then blue dice, probably a close second, because they're also in your anti-squadron armament. So you got the 2 upgrades that I think are most significant here. You got offensive retrofit and weapons teams, so you can do boarding teams on this one, or you can do squadron support. You can do a lot with those 2 upgrades. They're very common amongst Rebel ships, and it's nice having them here as well. But what really makes the Starhawk great and unique as far as upgrades is the fact that it's got double officer. Very few ships have double officer in the game. Phoenix Home is the only other way you can do that for the Rebels, and but this is definitely a little bit more of an all-comers type of ship that can fit into a lot of different builds, and it allows you some really great options if you're doing a carrier-based Starhawk, or defensive officers, or utility officers. You can do a lot of different combinations that you normally wouldn't be able to do either. And we'll look at some of those in our fleet building. But this does come in at 140 points, which makes it obscenely expensive. So it doesn't always fit into every build. But if it does, it's, people are going to be looking at your centerpiece. And of course, it's going to be beautiful on the table. So you're going to have great fun with that. If we look at the Starhawk class Battleship Mark II, we're going to notice a couple of changes, but not too many. Still, we have the same values: squadron, command, and engineering. We still have the same defense tokens, hull, speed. Our upgrades are actually still the same as well. So what are our main changes with the Mark II? Well, we're going up 10 points to 150. By the way, how about the shields, right? The shields are the same on both of them as well. 6 shields in the front, 4 shields in the sides, and 2 in the rear. It's still a little weak in the rear, but a lot of times people aren't going to get around to the rear of the Starhawk. I mean, look at all the red dice you've got. You've got even more red dice on the Mark II. The Mark II has better range, and also better range for its anti-squadron battery. This is one of the most significant changes here, is it does have a red anti-squadron armament. It's red and a blue, so this has a tremendous range for dealing with enemy squadrons. And red dice is particularly awesome, because there's so many different things you can counter just by having a long range. You can combo into that by having a long-range squadron shot. So I really like having red dice in the squadron armament, and then having an extra blue in there is just also cool, because if they're a little bit closer, you can do some great, really cool stuff. As far as our armament, we've got 3 blue and 1 black in the front, still with our 4 red. So we kind of sacrifice some of the black dice that this ship would have by upgrading them in color a little bit, and that's kind of where the points come into. We extend the range of our anti-squadron, and we're also extending our side arcs a little bit by changing that black up to a red. So we have 3 red and 2 blue. So a lot less punishment if you're at close range. with this ship because only the front is going to have a black die now. So again, this is not a ship that really needs an ordnance upgrade. But what it really does is at medium range is when the ship is generally its most deadly. But also being a threat at long range, which is really cool. And it's still having the salvo. Now, the rear arc, it upgrades the black to a blue. So we have, at medium range, we have a really potent salvo attack that is going to be very, very cool. Now, both of these ships have one key weakness for a big, big ship. It's the same key weakness that a Super Star Destroyer has. It is the lack of a defensive retrofit. You'll notice that, I didn't talk about defensive retrofit at all. Now, you might say, oh, well, that's no problem. I've got 14 hull. I've got 6 shields in the front. I don't need... Well, you know what? A couple of rounds of concentrated fire, you can still easily kill this ship if you don't plan around it. And so there's a couple of ways it deals with this defensive retrofit. So I've got to talk about Kirsta Agate. She's a 20-point commander. I usually don't go through all of the commanders that work on a lot of these ships because you can build lists with any commander you want. And but Kirsta Agate came out with the Starhawk. She was released in the same expansion, and she's one of the most popular commanders in the Rebels. Also, definitely one of the most popular commanders for the Starhawk. And while she works on any ship in the Rebel Alliance, she's especially good on the Starhawk because she if she's on the Starhawk, it makes your opponent say, you know what, I'm just going to totally ignore. I'm not even going to bother shooting the Starhawk. There's no way. So what does she do for 20 points? Well, she's unique in that she is not a commander that gives your fleet a benefit. She gives one ship a benefit, and it's a powerful benefit. And so she works so well on the Starhawk because in many Starhawk fleets, the Starhawk kind of is the fleet, right? It's the only expensive ship in a lot of fleets that tend to use it. And so it's like you kind of sort of proxying your whole fleet into this one ship, and she really makes it count. So you're kind of getting the biggest bang for your buck. Like if you put her on a CR90, the CR90 is going to do better, but it's, you're not getting as much value out of that. So the bigger of a ship you put her on, the more value you get out of her. So what does she do? First off, she gives you 2 different things. The first one is after you deploy, you gain a defense token. It cannot be, however, a scatter, which makes sense. If you could be a scatter, it'd be so broken. But still, you get an extra defense token, which means it can be a brace. It can be a salvo. So you can put her on a different Rebel ship, and all of a sudden they have salvo now, which is pretty cool. But usually, a lot of times, people will pick up another brace. This is, I think, the only way in the game to gain a brace token. And so that's definitely the most common choice with her, is to gain an extra brace. She also says, during your spend defense token step, if your speed is not 0, you may discard 1 defense token to resolve the effect of that defense token. You cannot resolve the effect of each type of defense token more than once per attack. So basically, what is she doing? She basically acts as the defensive retrofit. She's like, oh, did you accuracy my brace? I can't spend brace tokens? No problem. I'm not going to spend the token. I'm just going to discard it, and I'm going to get damage reduction. Like you get the effect of it without actually spending it. So even if there's something that says you can't spend these types of tokens, you're going to like, oh, I'm not spending it. I'm discarding it. So she cheats anything that's going to block your defense tokens. And it's pretty incredible. So I love that. And it's very, very potent. And it's a huge deterrent against going against a Starhawk. So she's very, very popular. I also want to talk about some of the different titles we have, because these also are ways to deal with the lack of a defensive retrofit, because each one of the different titles that we have available to the Starhawks also gain additional defense tokens. Now, if you combo Kirsta Agate with a title, you're actually going to have 2 extra defense tokens, which again makes this thing so close to the Super Star Destroyer with its 6. It would have 6 defense tokens once you kit it out. So again, very, very, very strong ship when geared out. I'll start off talking with the Amity. The Amity has the restriction of being only available to be used on the Mark 1. Again, out of all of them, there's only one title that you can use on the Mark II. So Mark 1 tends to be a little more popular because you have a lot more title variants between it. So the Amity is only 6 points, which also makes it pretty popular because it's particularly cheap. It gives you an evade. After deploying, you gain the evade defense token. So evade is better now. So initially, this one wasn't that great, but once the Clone Wars came out and the rules change happened for 1.5, and evade now also works at close range, evade's a little bit better now. It's pretty cool ability. It's actually exceptionally good at longer ranges, and it's also good if you happen to be going up against an onager, which is going to try and get you some stuff from extreme range. Now you're just be like, no, cancel those doubles and do all this crazy stuff, which again, it stacks really well with brace and other damage cancellation effects. So I really like that. Although it's not the best on this ship, it's still nice to have, and better now than it used to be. But the other effect is when an enemy ship overlaps you, you may deal 1 additional face-down damaged card to both ships. Now, this is a really cool effect from a lot of ways. First off, you can afford to play the ramming game because you're like, oh, no problem. Normally we'd each take a face-down damage. But I can be like, no, we're each going to take 2 because I can totally, with the Starhawk, I can win the war of attrition. So I'm just like, yes, extra damage for you, go for it. And because this is a large-based ship, you're more likely to actually have somebody ram you because you're harder to get around because you take up a pretty big area of space. So I like it. And of course, you can fly yourself. And this one works really good on the Mark 1 anyway, because you want to be in close range. You want to have those black dice that you have actually being used on enemy ships. So you want to get in somebody's face and like, oh, you can't get around me now. I'm going to do extra damage to you when you hit me, and I'm going to attack you when it's my turn. Of course, Amity does nothing if I hit you. Now, Concord is our next title. This one is 12 points. It's very expensive. It is also restricted to only the Mark 1. But this one gives you a much more useful defense token, and that is a salvo. I really like the salvo, the extra salvo you're getting here. This one says, when defending, if your speed is 0, during your spend defense token step, you can spend 1 defense token. So here's, like, if you're running Concord, this is a version of this ship you might not want to actually run Kirsta Agate on, because Concord is the ship that kind of wants to use the tractor beam at speed 0. And it's going to be survivable at speed 0 because I can still spend a defense token. Only 1, but I can still spend 1. So I can still brace. However, since I'm speed 0, Kirsta Agate's like shenanigans won't work. So accuracies can still work, but it gives me a defense. It gives me a chance. And it's designed for that speed 0 situation, and usually that means that you're running the tractor beam. So Concord is kind of it tells you exactly what it's going to do. Sometimes it's really useful for the speed 0 stuff, but other times it's also just good because it has the salvo. So it's it works in both cases. Although granted, for 12 points, you're probably not taking it unless you plan to do the speed 0 shenanigans. That's also restricted to the Mark 1 only. Now we get up to our 10-point title here, the Unity. Now this one is probably the best title overall because it is, first off, it doesn't have the restriction. So it can go on to Mark 2. It can go on either one. It also is giving you an extra redirect token, which is very, very good. Redirect is, especially with the number of shields this has, redirect is always going to be useful, and so I love that. Also, it says while attacking a squadron, if the defender is engaged with a friendly squadron without the printed heavy keyword, you may reroll 1 die. This is cool because if you put it on the Mark II, again, you can run this one on the Mark 1 also. But if you're running it on a Mark II, you don't forget you have the red anti-squadron battery there, and that all of a sudden means that now you can reroll red dice, and that's especially cool, especially if you combo that with turbo laser reroute circuits, and now you got like 2 rerolls on a red die. Now you really have a high chance of getting enemy to get like a double damage or something like that on enemy squadrons, which is just super cool. Of course, this. This one's useful even if you don't really run many squadrons. It's nice just to get an extra defense token. 10 points for a defense token is a little expensive, but it's a good defense token. And so it's really nice. Because like if you run a gate and she gives a brace, then you have 2 brace and 2 redirects. Like that's super, super strong, right? And even if you run it without a gate, you got 2 redirects. Like, no, it's still a 5 defense token ship with 2 redirects. So really cool title. I want to take a look at some sample builds. All right, so there is certainly the option of just kind of running a Starhawk light. So there's certain things that are just generally, like, if you just wanted to really maximize the rest of the points in your fleet and try to run maybe another larger or medium ship or a couple of other small ships, or run a decent amount of squadrons or rogues or something like that, you might want to go a little bit light on the upgrades. And so there's some just really popular upgrades that I would always recommend taking with a Starhawk. One of those is going to be the Link Turbolaser Towers. I already talked about this a little bit, especially with the Unity keyword. It's just a great option, especially on a Mark II, because you got red dice everywhere, and you're going to salvo. So you're going to get red dice rerolls on every squadron attack, on every front arc attack, every side arc attack, every rear arc attack, and every salvo. It's really, really powerful. Kirsta Agate as commander is also always good. I already talked about her, but they also have she's fantastic. If you're running Kirsta Agate as a commander, definitely consider running Whalix Blissix. He gives you one of your defense tokens back, so if you do have to spend that brace, you can always get it back. It's a once per game thing, but he's fantastic. If you're not running Kirsta Agate as a commander, you could consider Kirsta Agate as an officer. She's also really good. She's going to kind of do something a little similar, but she does it a different way. Basically, she gives you a critical effect that you can use during a salvo, and she's going to let you to get one of your defense tokens re-readied. So she can kind of factor into Link Turbolasers with salvo, and you're like, all of a sudden I can kind of re-roll, fishing for that crit, and all of a sudden I can get my salvo back, and then I can salvo again, which is really cool. All right, so next up is a little bit bigger of a build. We're going to do a Mark I build here. We're running Amity on this one, and we're running a couple of Star Wars Rebels kind of inspired stuff. So there's some interesting things I thought for this one. So first off, Amity wants to punish people for hitting you, right? You want to kind of get up close and in people's face, and Amity's going to punish people for hitting you. I thought hardened bulkheads would be really nice on this one, because this will also punish people when I hit them. So now all of a sudden I can, or it makes me safer, right? So like all of a sudden I can hit you. I don't suffer for that, but you still do. So like it works into like they kind of pair up, they team up very well together. I like that. I put the Magnite Crystal Tractor Beam on this one, not to do the speed 0 thing, but the idea here is that maybe somebody else is going slow, and maybe I'm going fast because I want to get close. I have black dice on the ship. I want to fly in really quick. Maybe they're slow rolling it, and I'm like, no, I'm speed 2. I'm going to force you to go to speed 2. So this way you have to ram into me. Like you can't slow. You can't do the speed 1 and then just stop short, or if you're trying to turn around or whatever. I can kind of mess with you and hopefully influence you into hitting me, or maybe even better, you're a super fast ship and you're speed 4, and I'm coming in at speed 1. I'm like, no, let's just bring you to speed 1, because again, as long as I'm not doing speed 0, I can use this every turn. So I can force you to, like, oh, you're speed 1 now. Even a nav isn't going to get you past me, and that's one of the cool things about this. Of course, if they do finagle it, if they're able to go faster and get around me, I've got quad battery turrets to punish them for that. I've got leading shots. Gives me spend a blue die to get a reroll. I got blue dice everywhere except for the rear, even in squadrons, and so leading shots is a good one on here. I've got Katekin and Sholin if I need particular reroll. I've got all the colors of the dice, so they certainly work on this ship. But then I've got some really cool things. Ezra and Sabine, running them both on the same ship, super fun. It's a Star Wars Rebels themed ship, right? But on top of that, Ezra and Sabine both do something cool because they put things, they move things on the battlefield or put things on the battlefield. Sabine can drop some thermal detonators that can kind of influence the shape of the battlefield, and then Ezra gets to move obstacles, which definitely influences the shape of the battlefield. And the reason I think that those are cool on this ship is because maybe I want to thread this needle, and maybe I want my charges over here, and then I'll move asteroids over to this side, and so I want to punish you. So no, I want you to hit me, but if you go this way, well, Ezra puts asteroids over there, so you're going to suffer from going that way. And then there's thermal detonators on this side, so you're going to suffer for going this way. So they're kind of helping steer you directly into my ship. And that's kind of the idea there. So I thought that that's kind of a fun combination that you can do with a 2-officer setup. Next up, we have a Mark II build. This one is going to be using Unity. Again, we're going to be... This is the idea here is that we have some other squadrons, maybe some cheaper squadrons. Maybe we've got a decent amount of squadrons we're going to throw out there. We run really punish enemy squadrons. So I put, I put Link Turbo Laser Towers on this one, again, with Unity. Like I already said, it goes well together. If we're expecting to go up against enemy squadrons, we've got point defense ion cannons here. Like, oh, I force you to reroll every time you attack me at close range, which is super cool. If you do attack me, I also get counter 1 with quad laser turrets, which is also super cool. I also have ruthless strategists. Like, oh, are you a scatter ace? No problem. I'm just going to deal 1 damage to one of my Z95s and deal an automatic damage to you every time I attack you. And I can also work at long range. So like 1 squadron shot, I might be able to hit your entire team and do lots of damage. I also have General Draven on here, so if you have counter or intel, if you're on any interceptors or whatever, I get to add an extra die. I can add a red and then re-roll it with Link Turbo Laser Towers, so I can do so many cool stuff. I can re-roll again with Unity, but even also. Lots of really nasty anti-squadron shenanigans. I also have the Expert Shield Techs on this one. And this one works on any... I think Expert Shield Test kind of stands apart from the synergy of everything else, but it's also very good against squadrons, because if they do get it, they do re-roll an extra damage coming through, I can just be like, oh, I'll just spend, a redirect and just negate that damage instead of redirecting it. And the Expert Shield Techs work so well with Unity because of the fact that I'll have an extra redirect, so now all of a sudden I can be canceling like 2 dice per turn without having to or 2 damage per turn without having to redirect them. It's really good for the little plink damage, and I like that. Next up, we are going to be doing a Concord list. This will be our last build of the video. This one does want to go speed 0, right? This one absolutely wants to go speed 0. It's going to try and do everything it can to get close to you and to punish you. And so Concord, the title, of course, we talked about that already. You're going to be going speed 0 here. You are going to be doing the Magnite Crystal Tractor Beam Array, of course. We have some interesting things. So if we're speed 0, of course, we get the 1 defense token we can spend. I've also got Major Durlin on here. He's an extra damage reduction, and he's not a defense token, so you can't accuracy him. If I'm speed 0, I can still stop 1 damage per turn, which is nice, especially if it happens to, be like, a 1 bomber rolled a crit against you, and I'm like, all right, no problem. I'll reduce the damage. Now I take no face up. Lando Calrissian. You get a big shot against me, while I'm at speed 0, no problem. I'm gonna now I can defend if I really need to. Lando's generally not taken on the Starhawk all that much, but he's not a defense token, and if you need to, he could be really awesome in this situation. But since we're a black die ship, we also have some offensive things. We've got Ordnance Experts, gives us our black die re-rolls. We have flak guns, which is going to change all of our squadron battery to black. So we'll go from a black and a blue to 2 black. Not too... That's actually pretty good there, because we've got the Ordnance Experts. So if we do any squadron attacks, we'll get to re-roll both of them. But it's also going to give us a better salvo, and the DB827 heavy turbo lasers factors into that salvo as well, which is really cool, because we do have a black die in the salvo, being able to do that up to medium range now with the flat guns. We just have a really nice counterattack that I really dig. I like it quite a bit. Plus, we have Ordnance Experts that's going to work with that as well. We also have the ion cannon batteries, which is an interesting one that I thought of to be able to basically get rid of somebody's tokens. So if we are shooting you, and like maybe I'm planning on magniting you and reducing your speed, here all of a sudden if I get a blue crit, now I can make sure that I can work on getting rid of your nav tokens if I want. You could also change this around and swap your offensive retrofit for a Phylon, which is another possibility. Although that wouldn't work against a Super Star Destroyer. So there's things like that to consider. So if you're really trying to lock somebody at speed 0, you might want to also bring like slicer tools or something like that in with this build to change their top dial from not being a nav. If you're going to strip the tokens, you also want to have some other way in your fleet to be able to strip the top dial as well. And that's a look at the Starhawk. Hopefully I kind of hit on all the bullet points that you guys were interested in. If you guys want to talk more about the Starhawk, let me know down in the comments section. Also jump into our Discord. Love to have you there. I was talking a little bit about space battles also earlier, and I think I really liked the Battle of Jakku. I loved the way it was written. It's one of my favorite space battles, but I got to give it up to Return of the Jedi, especially for the time period it was made in. Like, that was one of the greatest space battles of all time and still holds up today. Outside of Star Wars, though, I really like a lot of the space battles from Deep Space Nine, and so I'm throwing a little Trek out there too. They had great space battles in Deep Space Nine, especially in the Dominion War. I loved those. Really, really iconic of what I want to see more of in Star Trek. So hopefully we'll get more of that in the future, and hopefully we get some more tabletop gaming with Star Trek. I really wish we could get Star Trek Armada too, because it'd be more Armada to talk about, especially with whole different ships and different possibilities. All right, guys, I'll talk to you later. I want to thank you all so much for watching. Stay tuned for more Armada videos and more Star Wars tabletop gaming videos. Big thanks to my patrons. You guys are absolutely amazing and help make this channel possible. So thank you for your continued support. And we'll talk to you later. Live long and prosper. May the Force be with you. Be excellent to each other. So say we all. You can't take the sky from me. Always wash your socks. And call your mom. And call your family. Let them know you love them.